Welcome once again, everybody, to the Collar and Elbow podcast, or the CaE podcast for short. I am Kenny Oak, your esteemed host slash co-host, joined with, as always, by my all-time great. The hype was there for him, and he lived up to it. My co-host Chris Harris.
If you're the host and a co-host, it's like you're 75%
I
of the entire.
Some have said I can
Ugh,
definitely take on that burden, which
and flop with it. Some would say. You might bust. I don't
no,
know.
I'm Peyton Manning. You are
Ryan
Eli
Leaf.
Manning. You know, you
I still get my wins.
you still won 2 Super Bowls. You
Ah,
performed.
who's uglier? Eli.
Oh, Eli's way. They're both not
Peyton's
good-looking
head.
dudes.
Yeah.
Their heads are huge. Cooper. Cooper was probably the best-looking one
There
of
we
the
go.
Mannings.
Of the Manning clan.
Yes. Well, we went from going a year or just under a year without recording anything to now we have two in the same week. Like that's
Content.
it. It is. That's something that we had sorely lacked for a long time, but it's something that we're not going to be missing now. So today we are talking. Kind of alluded to it. Uh, Busts, guys who came in with huge potential and for whatever reason didn't live up to it. Obviously, we're going to be bringing up the names you know already, the names you know and love, like Tim Couch, Ryan Leaf,
I do love these names. Brian
Kwame
Bosworth, just to
Brown,
name a few.
Anthony Bennett, those guys.
The
But
goats of the categories. Yeah.
we'll throw some curveballs in there, and we're going to talk more than just football and basketball. We've got some guys in MMA and boxing that didn't quite live up to the hype.
Yeah.
So, I mean, without further ado, Bubs, what are you drinking?
This is vanilla whiskey.
Oh,
I thought that cup said Scooby Doo. It actually says
so cray
so
about
crazy about you.
you bought it. I mean,
Well, it wasn't for you.
I'm using it though.
Yeah,
Those
well,
kids are asleep.
I get it.
We are live, obviously. If you're watching this, you know already, but we are live on Twitch at Six Star Productions. We will be on, as long as this does what it's supposed to do. You'll see our beautiful faces on YouTube, but if not, you will see us or hear us on YouTube.
Bob,
.com
speaking of
slash
Twitch,
Six Star
though,
Productions.
are we going to be getting some more content going on the Twitch angle? You and I are both, heavy gamers. You are much more of the
Yeah.
streamer gamer than I am.
Well, I
So,
just downloaded Madden 21, and maybe I'll do a quarterback career on the channel. Get that
and
on
you'll call
Twitch.
him Ryan Leaf, and it'll be a much better story.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Bubs.
20 years later, the
That is a
resurrection.
hell of an
I
idea.
feel like that draws a minor crowd.
Oh my
Go
God.
Ryan. There's still a crowd
You are
out there that wants to see him succeed.
you are amazing. I mean, I want to see him succeed. Let's be real with ourselves. I mean,
I don't know if I don't quite know if we were dying for a hero of a quarterback in the early 2000s, late 99 era, but I don't know if it was ever meant to be him.
Why wouldn't it?
I don't know, because Kurt Warner had just gotten done bagging groceries, and he's like, you know what? I feel like winning some Super Bowls.
Well, to be fair, Ryan Leaf hit the scene before Kurt Warner had the chance to.
Well, because he was bagging groceries, he was busy,
Well, he
doing
was being a
blue collar
star.
work.
He was being a star in the Arena Football League. Had a game named after him, for Christ's sakes. Bubs, I am posting this to Facebook.
40-year-old John Elway, perhaps, in that era. I don't know.
We are live.
Nevertheless, yes, Twitch is going to be popping much more for us now on the Six Star Productions angle. We want to get that going as well, because our content before had been a lot of wrestling, and if you heard our comeback tour yesterday on episode 89, we're broadening the horizons to all of sports. Gaming is going to fall in there as well because we both are gamers to a lighter degree on my side. And we're going to be touching a little bit of everything
I
now.
do have that new Xbox.
So you do, and I just can't seem to find one in the entire state of Georgia.
I got
Never
lucky.
less.
You have to get it online. You're not going to
I
find it in
I know,
store,
and I need to have 4 or
but
5 devices going at
that's what
once
I
to,
did. I
to
had me
secure it.
with 2 phones,
Mm-hmm.
then I had Emily on her phone, and we had 3 different carts going, and
Good. One of them came
three
through.
three different Xboxes in carts, and
Mm,
luckily we coordinated appropriately and didn't order more than one
right.
because that would have hurt the budget.
And you would have had to resell, mark it up for a value, Bubs. It's
Oh
okay,
yeah,
resell.
absolutely. But
That's business.
CAE does not pay well enough to be able
Don't
to do that.
no. $56.
Come on, Anchor, get
In
back.
the,
Come
we're-
back.
we need you desperately more than ever, Anchor, along with various other, Manscaped. We'll all be calling you later.
I
Bring you
need
guys back in the fold.
Wow, my lawnmower 3.0 is working just fine, and
Oh,
I use
still
my
fine.
2.0 for other things.
Go on.
So,
Mm.
ooh, I
Here
know
we
we're
are.
speaking of busts, this whole show is a giant bust.
Giant, huge bust from day
Yes,
one.
God. We have so much potential, but we just
Yeah.
could not live up to it for whatever reason. Was it our coaching staff? Or was it the scouts that built us up to such a degree that
Yep.
we look like can't miss?
Yep.
Yet that's all we've done.
There's a deeper
It's
problem.
we're huge in Saudi Arabia, in
Oh
that
God.
region.
Well, then the Pan Ams too were
Huge.
actually
Oh,
quite
I was doing a
over.
comp over
That's
there
the
the other
that's the
day.
the Pan Americas. If you didn't
Right, all the countries that happen to be in
Pan, it's a it's a
America.
Pan.
I've
Uh,
competed.
inside jokes.
Great.
Bubs, I'd like to start with that topic though. If we're not going to go anywhere else with this,
What, the Pan Americas?
no,
Doing
not
some
the Pan
comps?
Ams, not the comps. More
Okay.
so the entire scouting process and how one becomes can't
Over.
miss.
Right.
So I think we could.
Someone may be unfairly given that label.
Right, and let's be honest. In major sports, it starts in college usually, and it's the scouts, it's the Mel Kipers, it's the Todd McShays of the world that
Right.
work the analytical part of this and the draft expertise that begin to label these guys as the next coming of whomever who was a successful person, just because of intangibles, not necessarily because of skill
No,
or.
it's 100% because of skill. In my opinion, those scouts label
Oh.
someone can't miss 100% because of skill.
So you don't think that they just sometimes arbitrarily pick someone and say, you know what, he goes to this big school. We haven't had a big name quarterback from this era. He's now the number one guy that we're gonna get behind, and they start pushing that. As far as
So
the scouting system,
you're saying that what school you go to is part of your intangibles, because
yes,
I don't think that has anything to do with intangibles. Intangibles are not quantifiable.
they're not. I'm saying that if a major
Showing what
university,
school you are is quantifiable. Oh, he played at Alabama. Well, I can quantify that he actually indeed does play at Alabama. Now, I do feel that scouts do put a little too much stock into where someone plays their ball, but I don't think that that's something that leads to a person being labeled can't miss.
there's a lot of blind trust.
Because if that was the case, then every quarterback that's come out of Alabama, Ohio State, Florida, they would all be can't miss prospects, and they aren't. I mean, let's see, Tua was the only can't miss Alabama quarterback prospect basically ever.
And you bought into that too, as watching
No,
him on TV. You saw him as a can't miss quarterback.
I didn't, but the scouts did. Everyone on TV told me he was can't
Now we're
miss.
talking. Now you're getting to my point. Good. Okay.
Well, no, it had nothing to do with him playing at Alabama.
No. The scouts and everyone else told you,
It
and
had
they showed you rankings,
right.
and they said we think he's gonna be the number one quarterback
Yes.
off the board. Yeah.
Yeah. That's not proving your point, though, about
Oh,
school being
you cut me
intangible.
off after about one sentence, so I'm still waiting
Okay,
for you to
you all
finish.
right? Go on. Whatever.
Blind trust, Bubs. There's
Which is apparently
college,
what I have in you, and
a lot of that. There's college scouts that scout these kids at the high school level, right?
yes.
And they label them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 star products, right? And these 5 star guys end up going to the major universities like Alabama. We'll roll with that for an example. And I think there's a lot of blind trust by NFL scouts who are taking into account that a kid was once a 5 star product who played 3 or 4 years at a university like Alabama, and he's 6'7", 340, and he's a left tackle,
Oh,
and he
I
runs
was
a
like, I thought
and
we were still
he
talking about quarterbacks. I was like, God, this guy's mad.
yeah, and he runs a 4.2,
He's an Adonis. Okay.
all these magic things, right? And they pick him and say, you know what? It's all there. It's got to be there. But how else is that getting proven to us? You know what I mean? And it's not like we can't sit at home and watch thousands of hours of tape of these guys.
Right.
We don't ever get that opportunity. So we're told this left tackle is the number one dude. Here's our reasons why, and it's the things I just named off. And now they say, well, he's big. He's done this for a while. He was a 5 star recruited by somebody else, and we're going to take that and run with it. And now he's the number one left tackle off the board.
I do think that there are certain positions where that does lend itself to the scouting process. If you're a big, strong offensive lineman and you happen to go to an SEC school, you will be given favorable grades. Um, there are certain schools like USC for some reason, if there's a quarterback
Hmm.
that happens to be okay, barely decent, like Sam Darnold, they get anointed as a can't miss prospect. So, but it's not solely based on that. It's when someone gets labeled can't miss, in my opinion, it's 100% based on their skill set. Like with quarterbacks, it's the kid who's got the big arm.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to go ahead and already bring up Jamarcus Russell?
Huge arm.
He had a massive. He can kneel at the 50-yard line and sling it through the goalpost.
Hmm.
Okay, and for whatever reason, that made him a can't miss prospect. He didn't come from a quarterback school. He didn't come
Right.
from your typical, oh, this guy plays in this system. You know, he wasn't even necessarily a winner. He had one really good year where we won 10 games, won the Sugar Bowl against another guy in Brady Quinn, and that was a rough year for
Good for
quarterbacks.
Notre Dame to be good though every now and
Um,
then.
but because he had those skill sets, he didn't show any of the other typical kind of attributes that are looked at for a top flight quarterback, but he had the big arm. So he was labeled can't miss. His ceiling was through the roof. That his ceiling was
Right.
high.
Okay.
You get what I'm
So
saying.
so do you think that since he also played at a major school, even though LSU doesn't typically produce all the quarterbacks necessarily, but
Or
because he
any.
went there and I mean they had a successful year because they are a good program, that bumped his stock up just by that
I
point by
think
itself?
the fact that
If he's good enough to play at LSU, he must be good, right?
he was good in the SEC against SEC competition,
Right. Okay.
because you have to remember that
That the
SEC
best
will
defenses are
always
there.
get, yes, they will always get the preferential treatment from
Hmm.
scouts and pundits and talking heads on television and on the internet. Um, but it also he was in a quote unquote pro style offense,
Hmm.
and for whatever reason, scouts believe that if someone plays in a what's considered a pro style offense, that those skill sets will transition better to the NFL.
Right.
But I don't necessarily believe in that. I mean, look at Aaron Rodgers. Cal wasn't really a pro style offense.
Nor is it a powerhouse football team
No.
generally. So
Um, I mean, there's just so many different outliers that buck the trends of the national media and the scouts that there should be less emphasis on the old antiquated reasonings behind
Mm.
labeling someone a top flight prospect.
Because when some of these, if we're talking quarterbacks specifically, you get some of these major programs that have a lot of success, right? And a kid is great at the college level. We mentioned Vince Young before we started, right? So Vince Young had a
Yes,
great
he's
college
on my
career for
list.
as short as it was. Colt
Probably
McCoy,
the greatest college, one of the greatest college players, football players
yes.
of all time.
Colt McCoy was at one point the winningest quarterback in NCAA history because he had all the success in a lot of years at Texas,
Okay,
and then
so did
he
Kellen
goes to the
Moore.
NFL and he doesn't do anything with it. So at what point are we being told like this kid is great at this level, but here's that ceiling you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And college is still college, and then the professional level, the quarterback position, not it doesn't always take off, right? If we're talking these number one picks or these surefires, these Heismans, how many times has a Heisman player flopped? You know what I mean?
Yeah. But at what point is it the scouts got it wrong or where that player ended up on the pro level? Because there's 32 pro teams in the NFL. Do you believe that there's 32 pro coaching staffs in the NFL?
No, not full staffs,
Okay.
if that's what you mean.
Yes. What
No,
I mean by that is, are there 32 teams? Are there 32 NFL level head coaches and assistant coaches
no,
to fill?
no. So if a young kid went to 32 of those teams, he should be set up in a pro style system supported by all these coaching staffs, and he should be
With the proper development and
mentored and developed and taught all
mhm.
the things he. Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah.
Okay. So, how many of these guys are unfairly judged as outright busts when they did not have the proper support staff to help mold them? Now, going back to Jamarcus Russell, someone like that was an all-out outright bust because the intangibles weren't there. He didn't have the work ethic. There's
Yeah.
an awesome story about them giving him a tape.
The Blitz package, right?
Yes,
Isn't that what he
he's
watched?
yes, and he's like, "Oh, I loved it. Good stuff."
Really
There was
good.
nothing on that tape.
I think that argument is easily defended for some because you see a lot of veteran players that like stick around and stay in the NFL system. Those players I don't consider necessarily busts. So Colt McCoy is a shitty example because he was never a great starter, but he stayed in the NFL for over a decade,
Hell, he's
and
still in.
he is, I think, backing up for somebody
Yeah,
still. So if he's
wasn't he
good
with
enough
Washington? Didn't he
to
start
be,
this year a game or two?
I don't know if he started this year, but he was a Redskin at one point or a
Yes,
football team
a,
or
a WF tier.
tier. But then you've got guys that absolutely bust out of the NFL, like Jamarcus Russell. He
Right.
is a player that busted. I don't want.
Yes.
I'll never consider somebody like a McCoy who is good enough to stay in the NFL systems and contribute and be good
No,
enough to make the roster and maybe start here and there, spot start,
but
be a
he was
backup. Those
never
are differences.
anointed as a can't miss prospect. He wasn't even a first round pick.
No, not at all. But he was
What
successful at the college level.
right? What we're talking about are outright can't miss prospects that were chosen
Hmm.
in the first round, mostly in the top 10. And I mean, I'm looking at a list right now, and let's just start from the top. Let's talk about Vince Young.
Okay.
Was he, do you consider him a bust?
I don't consider him a bust because he
Why?
did have success in the NFL. He did take the
He had
Titans
success for one
to the.
season.
He won Rookie of the Year. I think he made a
The
Pro
one
Bowl.
season.
So I think that he was good enough in that time frame.
The one season.
He played more than one season.
He did, but he had one good season.
Yes.
So that one good season, which happened to be his rookie year before there was enough tape on him to figure him out, keeps him from being a bust in your eyes.
He
Do
should
you
have
see
never
what I'm saying?
been. He should have never been drafted where he was drafted.
Okay.
That's for sure.
I
Because there was a
agree with
lot of
that.
hype off of what he did in that championship game with USC and his year that year in general.
But think about that
And
draft. Who went first? Mario Williams.
Mario Williams, yeah, Reggie
Reggie
Bush.
Bush. Vince Young went third. Matt
Mm-hmm.
Leinart went 10th, I think. 9th or 10th. Somewhere in the
It's
top
later. Yep.
10, I believe, to the Arizona Cardinals. And Matt Leinart's another guy that he was.
He was anointed because he was and that's and USC was running college football. You remember how
Yes.
they were like the dynasty, if you will, of that time because they had Thunder and Lightning, right? Lendell
Yes.
White, Reggie Bush, and they had all the receivers and a
I
stout
was about to say
defense.
Rod Dane and Tiki Barber.
No, Lendell, and they had the head coach, right?
Yes.
And everything was perfect. And then
What did
you
that guy ever
want
amount to?
a Super Bowl here or
Oh,
there. Boo.
but
And but yeah, he was chosen. He was like and he was a lefty, and he went to a pro style system, and he was very good at the college level.
yes, he won a Heisman and finished in the top 3 the next year for the Heisman.
And Reggie won it, right?
Yes,
Right.
and Vince came in second.
Mm-hmm.
He he had all the stats,
Mm-hmm.
but because, and I guess this kind of proves your point, because he didn't really have all of the skill sets. He didn't have necessarily a strong arm.
No,
He didn't have a very accurate arm. He had a ton of athletic receivers and running backs that
great team around him.
they threw a ton of receiver screens. That's where a lot of his yards came from. Don't even have to drop back. You get the ball, you turn, you throw it to Mike Williams, I believe,
Yep.
was there.
Whew, gone. Yep.
And boom, 50 yards right there. You throw it to the flat to Reggie Bush, 50-yard touchdown. So he didn't have any of the attributes that I would label can't miss. But, and I'm just making your argument for you here, he played at USC
Mm-hmm. Winning pedigree.
and he won
Mm-hmm.
at a big school. And because of that, he became, like, let's say Matt Leinart played at Tennessee or a school, which was a school on the decline at the time,
Okay.
after Philip Fulmer left, or let's make it Mississippi State. Would he have led a team like that to victories? No, because he was the product of the system. He was a product of the talent that was around him.
Mm-hmm. And he never made mistakes because he was never put in a
Safe.
position to make
Correct.
a lot of mistakes because they never had to. They were blowing teams out by 40.
That's true. And
So,
Reggie Bush was doing a lot of that.
mhm. So
Okay,
when you have a complete power system where you have 2 top 10 running backs and then elite receivers, you can do really whatever you want, and it worked out in his favor. And
what a
he,
college football era
that
that
was an
was,
era. That was nice.
and hardly any of it. I mean, to a certain extent, I can call Reggie Bush not necessarily a bust, but he was drafted second overall by the
Hmm.
Saints.
As a running back, doesn't
He
happen anymore.
never
Yeah.
had a 1,000-yard season. He had some dynamic plays, and we were able to game plan in a way that we were able to utilize him. But
Yep.
did he ever turn into the massive star that people expected him to? Because
No, he was definitely a great
once the
playmaker.
Saints got rid of him, he bounced around from team to
Hmm.
team. Went to the Niners, went to the Lions. I forget where else. I
And
think
he
he
started
played.
just doing
Oh,
kick returns,
Miami.
and at one point, yeah.
Yeah. So I he could be on this list. But let's see who else I have on this. God, Joey Harrington and Charles Rogers. The Lions are the
I want to
kings.
talk about Charles Rogers. Yeah, the
Okay,
Lions are the greatest at this. Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
There are so
To
many
to take
talented
they took him at I think
receivers.
number 2. right?
Yeah, 3, I believe. I think it was number 3.
Okay. So they draft him 2 or 3. Let me look that up. So they draft him that early. And when you buy into a skill position player that early on, like generally a
And
quarterback
Roy
would be,
Williams, they did the same thing with Roy Williams.
exactly, and then it busts, you're building around that cornerstone piece that
If you're
we all
drafting
hope is
someone
Calvin
in the top
Johnson.
5, you are
It's a franchise
saying
player, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
He's a cornerstone piece that you are building around.
Yep. They took
And
Joey
it's
Harrington third pick and Rogers second pick the year after.
all right, so I had them mixed up. Got it.
Joey Harrington. Oof.
I love Joey Harrington at Oregon. He's one of those guys that had the high ceiling, big time potential, but
There we go. There's that word.
because of the organization that he went to,
Hmm.
it did not pan out.
So there's a part of this that rarely gets discussed by the media. It's
Macmillan.
it it really is. Some of these organizations are not prepared or capable of handling certain stars or
Right.
certain players that need a sense of development. And then there's others that where it's the obvious player's fault, right? Like Brian Bosworth was a shit person. He was never going to make it.
Yes.
Wasn't Seattle's fault.
No.
But if you go to an organization that has never been successful and they've never had winning attitude, it's very hard to put the right coaches and management and even team captains and leadership into an organization where it starts to mold and come together, where you have chemistry and then you can develop players. Because we don't see a great amount of franchise development by teams where you can take not necessarily like a dud player, but somebody who's a later round pick and then fully develop them
Right.
through the career until they become the GOAT quarterback like Tom Brady, right?
Right.
Doesn't really happen
Or
that much.
Russell Wilson being a 4th-round pick.
Fourth round, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I think the two franchises that epitomize your point the most are the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans. Because if you want to talk about draft busts, those two teams are pretty much synonymous with that term. Um, David Carr, the first ever draft pick for the Houston Texans. Tim Couch with the Browns. Baker Mayfield was being close to being put on that list
Yeah.
until,
Thank God he had a really good year this year. Yeah.
thank God, he got a really good coach to change.
There's a lot of talent on that team too that we never talk about. They're
There
heavy.
is.
Yeah.
They are, but they had been, but they've had poor coaching that wasn't able to get them to buy in and live up to those expectations.
It's these teams that haven't made the playoffs in decades,
Right.
right?
A losing mentality is created inside of those locker rooms, and the guys end up just being happy with, I'm a pro football player. I'm a starting left tackle. I'm a starting free safety in the NFL, and I'm making a boatload of money. I don't care if I haven't won in 10 years, and I don't care if I ever win.
Right, because they're still doing fine. Some
Right.
players don't necessarily care about winning at that level. It still sucks to lose, but you're not willing to make the change by yourself. That's why I think it'd be more so Detroit and Cleveland versus Houston, because Houston has had a much better level of success. They haven't won anything
Right.
substantial, but they have been well above 500 multiple times since the David Carr era. And Andre Johnson was a winning leadership type of player. And they've had pieces, but it's obviously never developed into anything. And now
Matt
they're
Schaub and Andre Johnson had a good run.
it was nice. Yeah,
Um,
Arian Foster was good for a bit, running the rock.
yes. So, okay, Detroit, yes. Detroit, you're right.
They can't win. They
They,
don't know how.
right. It's been so long, and even when they do win, when they made the playoffs in 2011, unfortunately, they ran into a very good New Orleans Saints team in the playoffs, who then ran into a very good Vernon Davis.
Yeah,
in
he
the
was just
playoffs.
he was just doing goat tight end things that year. No big deal.
They haven't been able to follow up on that. They've had a franchise changing quarterback in Matthew Stafford that they weren't able to do anything with. And I think Stafford has lived up to, for the most part, to the expectations.
Yes,
But
Stafford
the
has.
organization hasn't been on the same level as him.
I kind of want NFL teams, and I mean, this has been obvious at times too, but to really develop and dive into the win now attitude, like you see a lot of NBA organizations do when teams are when basically they're super teaming. You're bringing two,
Right.
three, even four stars together on a team to try and win now because you're in a certain prime. So when Calvin Johnson was the best player in the NFL at a point,
Yes.
and then you have Matt Stafford, you have these pieces. They didn't do anything to support either of those two players and
No.
build a stout defense, give him reliable running game, or anything else, because you can't win with just a star receiver and a very good quarterback, right?
How
It
much
didn't
of that
translate into
is
anything.
how much of that is the product of the salary cap and so much of the money being put into quarterbacks that there's not a lot of the piece of the pie. There's not as much of the pie left over to build around.
I buy that as a bridge you have to get over because both
But
of those
that's where
two players are
drafting
making big money.
but that's where drafting comes in. You've got teams that
Right.
can constantly retool because they know how to work the draft, they know how to scout. And as we've mentioned, Detroit and Cleveland are not very good at drafting. So
So when do you accept that and go, okay, we can't do this. Let's make some trades. Let's ship off this first round pick or this player that we drafted early 1 or 2 years ago, and let's
ask
bring in
Sean
these
McVay.
pieces.
Sean McVay did it right away. He's still doing it. I don't
Day,
know.
what
I don't
do you
know
mean?
how he's
To this
still.
day, he's still doing it.
I don't know how
Man
he's
has a
still giving
job.
away first round picks. I don't know how he has any
Win
left.
now mentality.
He's probably on 2035 right now when it comes to
Yeah,
first round picks.
yeah.
That team
That
will not.
organization.
He is the complete opposite of Jeff
We'll talk
Fisher.
about them in 12 years. The team that just couldn't quite get it done.
Nope. Talk about busts. The
McVay.
Los Angeles. I love him. He's a treasure. He
No,
has gotten
they
so
have a
many
lot of talent there
white
though.
male coaches hired in the NFL.
Oh
It's
God.
awful. Um, okay, so how about I think we've talked ad nauseum about
The
the
NFL, yeah,
NFL.
we're over that, yeah.
So why don't you run down your list of players you feel were the major busts that did not live up to their potential?
So Jamarcus Russell is that first player. Um, Charles Rogers, because of where they took him, and to be a receiver, you have no choice but to be
He
elite
wasn't good.
if you're
He was
going at that
not.
level. No, not at all. And I think I wanted to mention Trent Richardson. I know Trent Richardson was obviously injured,
Forgot
right?
about
There were
that.
pieces of that, but at the
Yeah,
end of
but
the
his
day,
awareness was so. He had like a 22. If I had to give him a rating, Madden rating on his awareness, it'd be a 15.
yeah, at the end of the day, he's a product of the Browns drafting him, but he was great in college, and his
He had a
highlight reels
great
are
offensive line to
absolutely because
block for him.
where'd you play? Yeah.
Okay, I get it. You proved your point on that one. Made me
All
look
right.
stupid. All right, here's my list. I made a pretty good list. So we've already named Harrington, Rogers, Russell. I've got Tim Couch,
Big
obviously.
couch.
A couple names that I remember fondly from when I was a little Kenny Oak Sports
Yeah. Okay.
was Akili Smith, being
Okay.
drafted by the Bengals in the first round. Keyshawn Carter,
Okay.
ton of potential as a running back. Uh, a guy that is a cautionary tale. Lawrence Phillips, drafted by the Rams, and that was just someone who he had all the talent. He just couldn't get out of his own way. With off the field issues.
Yeah.
I just
The player fault type
right.
stuff.
And then obviously everyone's favorite, Ryan Leaf.
Yes.
Let's
Man, what if he would have been great?
what if? Let's jump into a sport that you brought up a little bit earlier, and it's one that lends itself very well to the draft, where you can draft the one guy that completely changes your organization.
Yes.
You can draft the LeBron James that completely changes your organization, and then once he leaves, it completely changes your
Yep.
organization. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, the list goes on of the one guy that is the franchise changer.
Yep.
But then there's the list of guys that were thought of to be the franchise changer. And when you've got a lottery pick, when you have a top 3 pick in the NBA, it is so crucial
Mm-hmm.
to hit a home run with it, because it can change the fortune of your organization for years to come. And if
Absolutely.
you miss it, it'll change. You'll be in the same spot that you are for years to come.
Yes.
It's so vitally important to hit a home run with your top 3 draft pick in the NBA.
Yeah. So, Bubs,
Yes.
if Detroit had drafted Carmelo second overall, I wonder what that
That
would have changed in the
dynasty,
organization,
that's
because they won a
that's
championship the next year. And
yes.
they were a solid team for the next 4 or 5 years in the Eastern
And
Conference with
that
that core
guy
of
is on my
players.
list. The
And I
guy they
understand that.
drafted
But
instead.
instead, right, Darko Milicic
Yes.
goes number 2 over Dwayne Wade, over Carmelo, over
Yes.
Chris Bosh.
What,
Those are the
probably
key.
the best draft of the last 20, 30 years.
Plus, yeah, since like 96, 97 at least.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's hard for me, and that's the argument that I like to have with folks over this is, yes, Darko's a bust. He's a great Euro player. He's even gone back and had success in Europe, right? But Detroit won a championship, and they messed it up, and they still won a championship the next year.
Right. Well,
And
the piece, to be fair, the pieces were there, and the
mhm,
coaching in some aspects is just as important, if not more important. Like, if you've got your one franchise player, like a LeBron, the
mhm.
coaching doesn't matter all that much. Even though we've learned that Eric Spoelstra is actually a
Yeah,
phenomenal
look at that.
coach. And what do you know? The Heat won a bunch of titles. Well, bunch, 2 titles, but um,
Success nonetheless, and went to a finals last year, right?
right.
In the Asterisk League.
So, if you want to know what he's talking about, go and listen to our last episode.
Uh,
Um, so, Larry Brown
mhm.
was, in my opinion, that missing piece, the one that hooked everything in together and made it work.
Okay.
But where I think it changes is if they draft Carmelo, they have a scoring option that thrusts them into future NBA finals.
Right, because that team was never built on a scoring star. It happened
No.
to be Rip Hamilton from the mid-range for
Right.
23 a game, but Carmelo he's in the conversation of best pure talent scorer of all time. So that's your cornerstone piece, and that's exactly what he ended up being for both Denver and New York,
Yeah.
right?
He took
So,
both of those teams to the playoffs, and
mhm,
if he would have had the defensive help and the coaching that Detroit had at the time, I mean, I can't imagine what would have been.
what would have been?
I mean, it would have been interesting. We could have been seeing Kobe and Melo in the NBA Finals
We could have,
against
right?
each other.
He's the example of the player simply wasn't good enough, and he was never NBA ready, and he shouldn't have been taken where he was. So he's the example of the player shouldn't have been taken there. Then you have all the other examples of like
And he
players
was a
that,
fine player. That's what the issue is that
oh yeah,
if he was picked 15th,
hmm,
he would have been touted as, wow, he was a very solid player, and that team made a really good choice in picking him up. But because he happened to be in one of the greatest drafts of all time and was chosen in
yeah.
front of first ballot Hall of Famers, it doesn't help his case.
So let's compare the player who wasn't good enough, and then the people that get injured, right? Like Greg Oden.
Right.
So Greg was
Sam
taking
Bowie.
over. Yeah, Greg was taking over Kevin Durant. And that's probably hard for Portland to still accept to some degree. But if you watched Ohio State basketball when Greg Oden was playing,
Which I did. I was really into college basketball at
we
this
would have,
point.
everybody was going to take Greg Oden,
Before he
number
even
one.
played a game, he was going to be the number 1 pick.
Right. It was the same exact reason why Hakeem was always going to be drafted over Michael Jordan.
Yes.
Everybody was taking Hakeem.
He was
And
7'2", and he was a rim protector, and he wasn't. Because there's always been, even though there's such an onus on spreading the floor and scoring from the outside, for some reason the big man in the middle will always fascinate, will always,
that's why Rudy Gobert still has a job.
right? Defensive
Yeah.
player of the year.
Yeah.
But they're
And
not the
Miles Turner,
guy.
same thing.
There's no one though. There's not a big man that's going to lead you to a championship.
No, not now.
Those days died with Shaq's prime.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people on my list are those big men that were supposed to be the next Shaq that would lead their team to titles.
Yeah.
When, in the grand scheme of things, it's point guards and small forwards that are the true number
That's
one
what you have to.
guys.
That's what you have to build around. Absolutely.
Right. I mean, look at a guy like Zion. He's a hybrid player that can be a 4, but you put him at the 3, and his athleticism just blows by everybody.
Everyone.
And he's someone
And
you can build around.
and if he develops a jump shot that's reliable, he's the next problem in the NBA. Yeah.
Yes. So, let's talk about those guys. So, you mentioned Greg Oden. He's actually the first guy I wrote down. But what about a guy like Anthony Bennett that was, as we talked about before, a can't miss prospect? He had all the skills. Went number 1 overall, one of the many number 1 overall picks to Cleveland that they just did not hit on, which proved my point that if you mess up this pick, it sets you back way too far. You need a LeBron to come in and completely change.
Correct. Yeah.
And then he leaves, and look at what happens again.
Yeah.
But Anthony Bennett's a guy. Kwame Brown. Oh, that's someone that was supposed to be
Didn't
next
Michael
big
pick
thing.
him though?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
And he
I get it.
He was awful.
He went nowhere. Bubs, not a lot of people watched Anthony Bennett's game before he was drafted.
He's at Kansas, right?
No, he played in Canada and UNLV.
UNLV. What? What am I thinking of?
I don't know. He played at Kansas. He might have been. I mean, not no. Even Nerlens Noel played at Kentucky. Ben McLemore went to Kansas, if that's what you're thinking about. But nevertheless, I was never. Again, this maybe goes back to the scouting problem. But having remembered seeing some of his highlight stuff and watching a little bit of that, Anthony Bennett was never the guy where I'm like, damn, that's a surefire number 1. That dude's gonna go fucking break backboards for the next 15 years.
Right, but a lot of people did.
I don't exactly know why, because Giannis was in that draft, although a lot of people, Giannis was not the player he was in 2013 versus what he is now. But Victor Oladipo was there. We mentioned Nerlens Noel, who has semi-flopped, but he's still been a reliable player. Otto Porter, who's developed into something reliable at least. You got a list of names, and even other bigs like Cody Zeller playing in Indiana that were better players on the floor than what Anthony Bennett was. And he turned out to be, I think statistically, Anthony Bennett's like the worst number 1 pick of all time by numbers and by shooting percentage and like lack of games played and all this nonsense. So he's easily my biggest NBA bust of all time because he should have never went where he was. And it's hard for me to say that it's Greg Oden because Greg was riddled with injury and his body, he looks like he was 52, right? Remember his entire career?
He was 23, looked like he was 85.
Right. So just from the draft perspective, guys that go so early like that, there's an injury thing that comes up as well. Brandon happened to Brandon Roy. Roy wasn't a number one overall pick,
But there
but
was a
again,
lot of
happened. Yeah, he was in his career in the
Rudy
NBA, and
Gay. Rudy Gay was
yeah.
supposed to be a big time player. How about those are all guys that had great college careers and couldn't translate it for whatever reason to the NBA. What about the one guy that single-handedly created the rule for not letting high schoolers in go into the NBA, and that is Sebastian Telfair.
Oh,
Remember
okay.
when he was supposed to be the next Kobe Bryant,
He was going to be,
the next
yeah,
AI,
he was going to be the point guard, and he was
yes,
going to be yeah, absolutely.
and how he was not
Well,
good. He wasn't
he
even a competent
he played in the
role
NBA
player.
though, and he stuck around for a couple years, and everyone remembers his name because early 2000s,
There were
you know,
mixtapes on him. There were all of this
yes,
hype. You want to talk
yeah,
about hype? To me, that's
that was
when
a
I
hype player.
think of someone who came in with a load of hype. And he wasn't even picked. I
Was
think he
it
was a
New
top
York?
10 pick. I know he played for the Celtics at one point, but that is and it's such a
Yeah,
funny thing to
that
think
he's
about. I think it was
now that
drafted by
you
the Celtics.
when you bring him up, I just remember seeing so many mixed. Yeah, you say mixtapes,
Mixtapes, yeah,
but
like and one back in the day.
he's related to somebody, and it's bothering me. He's from Brooklyn.
Mitchell Telfair.
He's the cousin of Stefan Marbury, so it's him and Starberry. That helps his career too,
Uh,
right there. He was selected with the 13th pick,
13th.
Bubs, 2004 NBA draft by Portland,
Portland. Ugh.
and they were
Portland
coached
just
by Nate
continues to
McMillan.
make this list.
Yeah, a lot of Portland references. And then he went to Boston, and he was a Timberwolf, and he's played around a bit, actually.
Okay. Good stuff.
Yeah. Hashim Thabit, though, that's a guy that always comes to mind for me
Okay. Tell me. Tell me more.
because it was when I've always
UConn,
wanted,
right?
yeah, UConn, the big center, big tall lanky dude, like
Yeah.
7'1" or some shit. So when Memphis took him, I always liked the
You were a
story of
Memphis guy. For some
I've
reason, you
I've
always
I've
rocked the
I've hopped on
Grizzlies
I've hopped on some Grizzly stuff
on
before, and to
NBA
see what
2K back in the day.
yeah, to see Zach Randolph and Gasol and these, Mike Conley, such a good team
Oh,
back
you were
in
a huge
11,
Mike
12.
Conley guy.
Big
I
guy, lefty stroke.
hated
those
playing
are
against you.
those are good times. But that's probably why I remember him so fondly, because like when some of these small market teams get good and they win championships, San Antonio's the prime example. They've been successful forever, but
Yeah.
my favorite team to ever do it is Detroit, and I talk about them a lot. When you take a team like Memphis and you're like, okay, we got the number 2 pick, let's set ourselves up, and they take Hashim Thabit, who wasn't the most dominant player in college, and UConn's a power school. But
Yes.
again, this goes back to big guy, raw talent, looks good, plays at a power school that always wins. Does that mean he should be the number 2 or 3 or whatever top pick just because of all those outlying things? It's
Right.
almost like far too often they take the skill and they put it over here, and they take all the other things like, well, look at his height, look where he plays for, look who he plays with, look at the coaching staff, look how he was in high school, and then they get this new equation somehow, and now Hashim Thabit is supposed to be the centerpiece of a Memphis rebuild, and it never really happened. So he's always up there for me.
So I think that's a very interesting concept, is that I think your idea of the school you played at as an intangible works much better in this scenario in the NBA than
It's
it
a lot easier
does,
in the NBA. Yeah.
because you see, some of these teams, I think there was one year where Kentucky had 4 guys, including bench players, get drafted in the
Anthony
first
Davis
round.
years. Mm-hmm. Him and Boogie
So
Cousins the same years.
it's just, and now I'm looking at that 2009 draft. Yeah, Blake Griffin, that was a Blake Griffin draft. James Harden,
Mm-hmm.
Tyreek Evans, Ricky Rubio.
That's a
Steph
nice
Curry,
draft. That's a nice draft.
DeMar DeRozan,
Who
Brandon.
went?
This
Who
might
went
be one of
number?
the
Who went number three?
best.
Who was number three?
James Harden
Okay, so there you go.
and Steph Curry went 7th, and DeMar
Yeah,
DeRozan went 9th.
goodness. And all these guys are cornerstone players.
Drew Holiday 17th.
I like Drew Holiday.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's fun to look at these guys, and I'm glad you brought up someone like Hashim Thabit, who went 2nd overall, and to just be like, who else is in this
was there,
draft?
and the list goes on.
And
Because not to say that Memphis hasn't had some success, right? They made the Western Finals 1 year, but this could have been a much different organization if you have Harden, if you have Curry, even if you take
DeRozan.
Tyreek Evans, right, or
Look at what
DeRozan,
Toronto did.
right? You take one of these players and you put another piece around them, and all of a sudden, you have a team that's a problem. So it's the NBA. It's much easier, like you led off with. You have the chance to change everything with one player, and that is what the Clippers did, right? Blake Griffin is not a bust.
Pat
but
Beverly was in the second round.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the Clippers started their rebuild with Blake Griffin.
Yes,
and it never worked out, even though they put all the pieces around Doc Rivers. It just never happened. But they gave themselves the opportunity, and they built it, right? And they just failed to get
Doc
there.
Rivers, I think he is overhyped as
a coach.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll die on that hill.
He gets the hype because he was with Lob City when they were just winning like crazy, and they were.
Well, he also gets the hype because he won a title in Boston, but he had
power team.
He had the big three. He had the original big three.
Yeah.
So it's hard to lose when you have talent. When you have 3 generational guys on a team, chances are you're going to win.
Yes.
It wasn't like Detroit, who the coach really brought everything together. I don't know. I just when it comes to Doc Rivers, I feel like there's a lot of
left to be desired for me.
He gets a lot of free passes.
That's fair.
But hey,
that team in Boston was nice though. Young Rajon was a problem too. So he had a great
team.
He had a lot of talent.
And it's hard to lose when you have a great team.
Who was the fat 6'7" center, Baby Shaq motherfucker?
Wait, no, I was going to say Kendrick Perkins, but no.
Not Kendrick
Perkins.
Davis.
Big baby Glenn Davis.
Big baby Davis, that's right.
LSU.
Playing center at 6'1". Yeah, that's right.
That LSU team was a problem. Glenn Davis and Tyrus. What was his? Tyrus Thomas.
Okay.
Rangy power forward type that would just block people out of the arena.
Oh. Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Went to the Final Four, lost to UCLA. Hard. That was. Florida won that year. That was another Joakim Noah championship.
That team was also stacked, though, too. That Florida team.
Holy crap!
That was the Al Horford Joakim Noah problem.
Just retired.
Did he?
Yes.
After a stellar career. Okay.
I know. It said after, was it 13 years? And I was like, I feel like he played for 25 years. Like, he just was, he's been there forever.
He stayed around. He has, and he's been successful everywhere he went. Made a ton of money, and
good for him.
Did he win a Defensive Player of the Year too, or something like that?
I don't think so.
No.
Maybe.
Sixth man. I don't know.
Maybe.
Anyway, he was nice.
What are some other sports where there have been guys that have just been massively hyped up, like a Shohei Ohtani in baseball, or Daisuke Matsuzaki?
Daisuke was nice for more than a year.
He did not live up to.
So baseball in itself is very difficult, I've noticed, even through watching it, but more than passively, I'll say, for the past 15 years. And even looking into some of these players, like the prospecting and the scouting is very different because of the farm system that
you're looking at
that the MLB
5,
has.
6, 7 years down the line.
And it's incredible to commit to a junior or a high school level player and say, you know what, you're going to be our dude, and you draft him, and then you put him through the system. And some of these guys, they never end up making it to
No.
the MLB era,
Like
and we would never
80%
even,
of them, like 85% of them never
yeah,
see a major league field. And so it's so impossible to say this draft, this guy was a bust
yeah.
because,
There's so much more leeway with
right,
baseball.
and for whatever reason, something could happen.
Yeah.
Whether he gets into a bad system, like a
Hmm.
bad single A, double A team, he just for whatever reason that team is absolutely stacked at that position.
Yep.
Like you have some teams that they're just so good in the outfield that they have this tremendous prospect that'll never see the field because they've got hundreds of millions of dollars
In the
tied up to
outfield.
their outfield.
Yeah, and he becomes a
So
DH player and he starts losing talent and going down, and then he's a utility and it just doesn't work, and then he's gone,
so
right?
baseball, it's hard to say go through a list and be like, oh, this guy was a
Yeah,
bust,
no
this guy
way.
was a bust. Can't do it.
MLB is very different. It's really about the lack of a salary cap helps, right? And I do kind of like that to a degree, but that's an argument for another day, I think. But to build a team through trade and through free agency is really how you win championships. Some
Yes.
organizations
You trade those
have
prospects.
you do. You trade them away when they're
Yeah.
still only potential, or they're really good in Double and Triple A. But some organizations have good farm systems, right? And they always will. They're always going to have that. And
Yes.
some of them can just build through that. But some of these smaller market teams that don't have that or have never had that, they're never going to get it unless they get that once in a generational player that just
Right.
happens to do it. And those players in baseball are even fewer than the NBA
Right.
and in
There's
football.
not a lot of St. Louis Cardinals out there. And I hate the Cardinals, being a Chicago Cubs fan.
Mm.
Uh, don't mind the Texas Rangers hoodie that I'm wearing.
Little
But
misdirection there. That's
yeah,
fine.
keep people on their toes. But that's an organization that has always had a great farm system. And because of that, they've always been a winner. The Yankees get a lot of grief for the money that they throw at free agents, but they've always had a good farm system and
And
have been
always
able
throw
to
away
bring
prospects too.
right.
Yep.
So baseballs, you can't really. I mean, you have guys like Josh Hamilton that were drafted, number one overall, but had their own personal demons that kept them away. But he ended up living up to his potential.
Still had a great career, at least
Right.
by numbers. Yeah.
Would have been a Hall of Fame, career if he
Yeah.
hadn't went to Los Angeles and just completely went into the tank,
Yep.
or had his personal demons continue to creep up on him.
Yep.
I look at so baseball. I don't want to, and to a lesser extent, hockey is kind of in the same boat
A little
because you
bit.
have a multi-layered minor league system where you have the AHL, which is essentially AAA, and you have the ECHL, which is essentially your double A, single A kind of leagues. So you draft these guys looking 2, 3, 4 years into the future. Is that why? Do you feel like that could be why some of these sports aren't as popular as, let's say, basketball and football? Because
Hands down.
you can follow these guys through
Hmm.
their amateur careers and then boom, right away they're making an impact in the pros. So you feel like you have an emotional investment.
Yes. So
Okay.
unless you were tied to one of these young prospects, these early AAA players or these high school players, even unless you know them or you're a family member,
Right.
you really don't follow them or track them unless you are a baseball guru and this is just your
Right.
life. And those are the 1% of the 1% of people. The casual fan, we almost need that instant relatability of you're going to be told this is St. Vincent St. Mary's High School. This is LeBron James.
Right.
He's going to be the next thing. And then you see the package and you're like, yep, I get it. And then here we
Then as soon
are,
as he
right?
made it into the NBA, you're like, I'm following this guy to
Yep.
see if one, he lives
He's
up to the hype, or you may be one of those people that were like, I want to see him fail because he was given so much
absolutely.
so quick.
Yep. So in hockey, it's not an obscure sport, but it's not followed by everyone in
No.
North America for sure.
But you do
And
have certain draft picks, like Lafreniere, who was drafted #1 by the Rangers. He's already on the ice playing
mhm,
for the Rangers, but that's not always the
he's
case.
he's the outlier. Yeah.
Right.
There's always going to be
Just
special.
imagine if the New Orleans Demons, Bubs, would have been able to
Got gotten a
draft
hold of
him,
him.
but
Yeah.
unfortunately, we did not get that draft pick. But
That's all right.
yes,
There's generational talents that are going to be there for everything. Same thing in football and basketball, in any type of combat sport. They're going to be there because God gifted them with the talent. And then there's everyone else that has to develop it because they have potential, or they were told they have potential.
right,
And then you need to be put into a system where you have the training, the coaching, the mentorship, and then you can become the next great thing. But a lot of players need all those things, and very few players need just what God gave them, and then they're great.
right.
There's always that spectrum is very wide.
Yes, like thinking about, one of our passions is wrestling, pro wrestling, WWE, AEW. The same can be said about some of those guys where there was a lot of hype behind somebody
Yeah.
and they came in and they just did not perform. And like a guy like let's see, Heidenreich, or
Okay.
these big guys, because Brock Lesnar came in, he was labeled the next big thing. He had
Hmm.
the look, he had the size, he had everything, and he actually was able to live up to those expectations.
What about Tough Enough winners 10 or 15 years ago, when
Like
Tough Enough was a
Maven.
thing, right? So yeah, Maven, right? And he got TV time, and he got a little mini feud, right? But that is a version of a wrestling fan being told, here's somebody with potential. We're going to show you some of their work, and you're going to see it, and you're going to be like, okay, I see kind of what they're talking about. He's green, or he can't do this, but he can develop this. And then they, they either do or they don't. And then there's always been these minor organizations, if you will, that WWE at least has had contractual agreements with, like Evolve and Smoky Mountain at times, and all these other,
Yes.
smaller places where they develop younger talent and let them get, go from green to a different shade of green and better at what they do. And then we have Lesnar, Orton,
Batista,
Batista, Cena,
Cena.
Shelton Benjamin, right?
Right.
So we have
Guys
all
who,
those things.
yes. I mean, The Rock was going to be considered a bust at one point.
A lot of football talent, a lot of raw athleticism,
There was, and he
drop
was
kicks.
pushed as the next big thing, but he couldn't live up to it right away.
Yeah.
And once again, that goes into, is it the performer? Is it the athlete? Is it the player? Or is it the coaching staff or the organization
Hmm.
that is around him? The
Yeah.
Rock got lucky because when he came in, he was at a time where he would have got lost in the shuffle because the organization was going to fail him.
96. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But a different mentality took over, a different, let's say a different coaching staff, a different mindset, a winning mindset, a more aggressive mindset came in, which allowed him to flip a switch and become the big star that he was always touted to be.
Hmm.
So, to kind of wrap all this up, who takes the biggest blame? Is it the player's fault? Is it the athlete's fault? Is it the performer's fault? Or is it his organization that is to blame? Such a
It's a broad,
such a
hard question.
crazy kind of thought to have.
9 out of 10 times, my answer is the player.
Okay.
It's the player's fault, not that he was drafted so high, but that
Right.
he was not able to meet those expectations. And I do believe that there's like literal maturity problems that are hard for some young men in a lot of these cases to be able to manage, because if you're 19, 20, 21, 22, you don't quite know yourself yet. You don't know what you need. You don't know how to do it. You might not even know how to communicate to your staff or your organization what you actually need. And that's not a thing
But
to blame somebody on. But
that's
at the end of the
where,
day,
and and
the goats can do it.
you've nailed it though. That's where the organization comes in.
Mhm.
Tom Brady doesn't become a GOAT without having a strong organization behind him.
Right.
Yes, he's got the work ethic, he's got the leadership, he's got the intangibles, but he needed that organization to mold him and guide him in the right direction. And once he got there, he didn't need the organization anymore. You
Right.
get to a certain point where you don't need an organization anymore.
Yeah, you're a made man. Yeah.
Right. Peyton Manning could have gone anywhere and have once he got drafted by the Colts, he and was with the right organization,
Hmm.
with the right coaching staff, with Jim Mora and then with Tony Dungy. Yeah, once that happened, he could have gone anywhere and have succeeded.
Yep.
LeBron James, honestly, he did not go to the right organization. Cleveland will never be considered the right organization,
Yeah.
but it
Not
was
not not at the
Miami.
time for sure. Yeah.
Miami
Yeah.
was the
Miami
right
did it.
organization. Once he went to Miami, became a winner, learned what it was like to take that next step and win a
Mhm.
championship. He has proven he could go anywhere now and win a championship. He's won a
Yeah.
championship with 3 different organizations. So, at that early crucial stages, I think it's up to the organization to not fail the
The player.
athlete.
Mhm.
But after a certain point, it then becomes the athlete's prerogative to carry on in the right direction or just completely throw it away.
Right. If they were given all the tools and they were handed everything and shown everything, and there's really no more,
Right.
there's no room for excuse.
Right.
If there's no blitz packages on the tape, there's no blitz packages on the tape, right?
Yeah, don't lie about it.
Yeah.
Damn it.
So there's players they're always going to need that extra step, and then there's again the once in a generation players that already have it. You just got to point them in the right direction,
Right.
and they're going to be set, right? And we still see that to this day. Do you think that Trevor Lawrence is that player
I'm
to point in the
glad.
right direction?
This is a great direction to go. I don't know. He was at the right organization with
Was
Clemson,
pro organization winning?
with the right coaching staff.
Hmm?
Is Urban Meyer going to be? We talked about this. There's 32 teams, but there are not 32 pro level coaching staffs.
Right.
Will Urban Meyer be one of those pro level coaching staffs? I don't know. It's yet to
Yeah.
be seen. He was a huge success in college, but as we've seen, there's not that many Jimmy Johnsons.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So we
Okay.
will have to see. Time will tell on that, but I'm rooting for the kid. I don't want to see anyone ever fail.
I want to see a Jacksonville Jaguar turnaround as a franchise and to see like this will be our generational experience of watching a kid go from here's the shiny object. He wins
Right.
a shit ton in college. He's the number one guy. They place him in an organization and it goes on from there. Like
Right.
this year they make it to 500. They miss the playoffs. Rookie of the
I
year
like to
though.
feel
Yeah.
like me and Trevor Lawrence are, the same because
Right. You
when
know.
I had just started with my organization when he was given the reins in Clemson, and I've ascended,
You have.
and I feel a connection. I want him to also
That's gonna be it.
ascend to the heights that I
God.
have.
Okay.
And
I'm
I'm
done
not
with
talking
you.
about the CaE podcast either. Even though we're trending where
we
we've
are
always trended.
we are
Just
double A at
just
absolute best.
we are rookie ball.
God.
Okay. We're below single
Why
A.
are we still green?
The problem is we're so good. We just
It's
don't know
that's
how to market
I know.
ourselves.
Full of charisma and juice, and we just don't know where to put it all. Point us in a direction. Somebody grab us.
We need actual
I need
production
management.
teams that can put this stuff together because we're clearly not capable.
Oh God, no. We
Um,
keep fucking it up.
yeah. We need a manager, Bubs. I need you
We
to
do.
find us
Let me get on the horn.
good.
I'll call
Because right
Vince.
now, we had high potential, but we got stuck with an organization that failed us.
Yes, ourselves.
And we've got a loser's mentality. And
I want to win.
I'm just happy with where I'm at.
Just happy to be here.
Yeah.
Starting free safety, making cash. Oh God,
Bubs, what a great discussion we had. And
solid
it's a
stuff all the
fun
way around.
discussion that can always be talked about because there's always new names being added to these lists.
Draft.
So, thank you for joining me, Bubs. We
Of course.
had a great talk. We will continue to have great talks moving forward. We will continue to broadcast live on Twitch at 6 Star Productions. You can also find the finished product on YouTube, also 6 Star Productions. You can find us on Twitter at CAE Pod. We are on Facebook. We're still labeled Collar and Elbow Wrestling, I believe,
Yeah, I
on
haven't gotten
Facebook.
to it.
I haven't touched Facebook. Working on a WordPress site
We
right
are coming
now.
up. Where's our manager?
We need someone to do this stuff for us because I don't have the time.
I'm gonna
I'm
call
going
Steve.
indoor golfing. Oh, Steve is such a marketer. He
I don't know how
is,
he does it.
but he's got so many comps
Yeah,
that
I don't think he has time for us.
he might be in the
We'll,
Pan Ams as we
we will
speak.
see. No.
But thank you guys so much for joining us. We had a great time. We love everyone that listens, and we'd love to hear your feedback, love to know the topics you would like to hear us discuss, and we would love to know just how beautiful you think we are. Because I think it's fairly, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a solid 5.5, 6.
To the moon.
Yeah. And you're a good 6.5, Bubs.
0.2. 6. We'll round
Don't
up.
cut
Okay.
yourself short. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining us. We can't do this alone. We need you to join with us to grow this show because together we're going to make podcasting great again. Thank you guys.